Your classic cuisine is a relic, Mark. We're going Michelin modern, and frankly, you're just not cutting it anymore. Time for fresh blood. Isabelle Moreau, the new general manager of the Gilded Spoon, delivered the line with a chilling smile, right there in the middle of my own kitchen, the stainless steel counters gleaming under the harsh lights, my brigade frozen mid-chop. 25 years I'd poured my soul into this place, built its reputation from a neighborhood bistro to a culinary landmark, and it ended like this, a public execution before service. The silence from my usually boisterous team was deafening, their eyes darting between me and this woman who smelled of corporate spreadsheets and ambition. I just stared her down, my face a mask of calm I didn't feel. She had no idea the storm she'd just unleashed, the loyal patrons and industry connections I'd nurtured like a delicate consommé. She'd soon find out. If the big Artunzi didn't just arrive, it bulldozed through the Gilded Spoon with Moreau at the controls. She was obsessed with disruption and synergy, words that meant nothing in a world of perfectly seared scallops and patiently braised short ribs. The first public humiliation came during a mandatory, all-hands meeting. She projected a slideshow comparing my signature dishes, the ones that had earned us 3 city stars for a decade, to dinosaur food, claiming they lacked Instagrammability. My blood boiled, but I held my tongue. The second came a week later during a kitchen briefing. She announced a new efficiency protocol that involved pre-packaged sauces and a centralized commissary, effectively calling my experienced chefs, men and women I'd trained for years, resistant to innovation, and a drag on progress. The final straw was her grand announcement of a complete menu overhaul to eliminate outdated dishes, effectively wiping my legacy off the blackboard. She openly sneered at my carefully curated supplier relationships, calling my insistence on farm-to-table charming but inefficient anachronism. It was clear this wasn't just about food, it was about her stamping her authority, eradicating everything that came before her. This was war new versus old, and she was determined to make me the first casualty. The irony was, my relic of a kitchen was the heart and soul of the Gilded Spoon. My team and I, we were the reason this place was booked 6 months solid, why food critics sang its praises, why it consistently landed in the city's top 5. My signature caca vin, the one Moreau called something my grandmother would make, was the most ordered dish for 15 straight years. We weren't just cooking, we were crafting experiences. The Gilded Spoon's reputation, its profitability, rested squarely on the foundation I'd painstakingly built. My kitchen generated 70% of the restaurant's positive press and repeat business, a fact conveniently ignored in Moreau's glossy presentations. I'd personally mentored 3 chefs who went on to earn their own accolades, to be dismissed as not cutting it. To have decades of dedication and proven success casually tossed aside like day-old bread, it wasn't just insulting, it was profoundly, laughably absurd. They wanted fresh blood, but were severing the main artery. Moreau's philosophy was simple. Food was data, diners were metrics, and a restaurant was a machine to be optimized. She talked about average check value and seat turnover rates, with a fervor I reserved for discussing the Maillard reaction. My insistence on sourcing heirloom tomatoes from a local farm, or spending an extra hour to clarify a stock, was met with thinly veiled contempt. We can get perfectly good tomatoes, flash frozen for a third of the price. Mark, she'd say, her eyes flicking to a spreadsheet on her tablet. And your stock. The lab says this new concentrate has an 87% similar flavor profile. She couldn't grasp that the difference wasn't in the 87%, but in the missing 13%, the nuance, the care, the human touch. For her, a reservation was a transaction. For me, it was an invitation to share my passion. Her world was cold, digital, and efficient. Mine was about the warmth of the stove, the alchemy of ingredients, the satisfaction on a diner's face. It was humanity versus the machine, and in her playbook, the machine always won. The purge began subtly, then escalated. My trusted sous-chef, Leo Maxwell, was suddenly reassigned to inventory management. My longtime maître who knew every regular by name and their favorite table, was replaced by a younger, more system-oriented host. They were systematically dismantling my team, my support structure, isolating me. Responsibilities I'd held for decades were stripped away. Menu planning became a committee affair, with Moreau's culinary consultant, a 20-something with a food blog and 0 professional kitchen experience, having the final say. They didn't just fire me. They were trying to erase me, to deconstruct everything I represented. It was a systematic cleansing of the old guard. The message was clear: anyone loyal to the old ways, to me, was next. They weren't just sweeping out a chef. They were trying to gut the restaurant's soul. And many of us felt the collective humiliation of seeing our life's work treated like rubbish, swept out with the evening's trash. It was a calculated, cold-blooded slaughter of traditional value. The day I was officially let go, my phone started ringing before I even cleared out my locker. It didn't just ring, it screamed, like a fire alarm in a packed theater. The first call was Arthur Starling, the city's most influential food critic and a man whose palate I respected immensely. "Mark, what in God's name is happening at the Spoon?" Some new woman called me, talking about synergistic dining experiences. I told her the only synergy I cared about was your beef Wellington and a good bottle of Bordeaux. His voice, usually measured, was tight with anger. Then came Mrs. Albright, who'd celebrated every anniversary at the Gilded Spoon for 20 years. If you're not in that kitchen, Mark, my husband, and I are not walking through those doors again. It's as simple as that. Call after call from loyal patrons, event planners, even suppliers I'd worked with for decades, all expressing shock, outrage, and unwavering loyalty to me, not the restaurant. By noon, I'd fielded over 30 such calls. It hit me then. I didn't just have customers, I had an army, a legion of people who valued what I did, who trusted my craft. The thought, initially a spark of defiance, began to smolder. Maybe, just maybe, I could take this army with me. Moreau had handed me a pink slip. My patrons were handing me a lifeline. The next morning, still reeling but with a flicker of resolve, I called Sarah Chen, a sharp, no-nonsense lawyer a friend had recommended. I laid out the situation, the abrupt dismissal, the casual cruelty of it all, and the non-compete clause Moreau had smugly slid across the table with my severance check, a ridiculously broad document aiming to keep me out of any culinary enterprise in a 50-mile radius for 2 years. Sarah listened patiently, her expression unreadable. When I finished, she took a slow sip of her coffee. "Mark," she said, "this non-compete is aggressive, likely overbroad, and potentially unenforceable in its current state. They can't legally stop you from using your general skills and knowledge. You're a chef, cooking is what you do." Hope, a fragile seedling, pushed through the permafrost of my shock. "But," she continued, her gaze direct, "that doesn't mean they won't try to make your life miserable if they perceive you as a threat. A lawsuit, even one you'd eventually win, is expensive and draining." We talked for hours. She explained the legal nuances, the risks, the potential loopholes. By the time I left her office, the anger hadn't entirely dissipated, but it was now mingled with a new, powerful emotion, determination. The idea of simply fading away was replaced by a budding plan. I wouldn't fight them on their terms. I'd create my own. A week later, Arthur Sterling called again. "Mark, I'm chairing the annual Children's Hospital Gala. Our usual chef, well, let's just say there's been a culinary redirection at his establishment too." I could hear the dry amusement in his voice. "The committee is in a panic. They need a miracle." I told them I knew a miracle worker who might just be available, interested in being our guest head chef for the event. It was a lifeline, a chance to cook again, to be seen, but without the baggage of starting a new restaurant immediately. I hesitated. The non-compete loomed. "It's a one-off, Mark," Arthur pressed gently. "A charitable event, no direct competition. Think of it as keeping your hand in." I thought of Sarah's advice about general skills. I thought of Moreau's smug face. "I'm in, Arthur," I said, a thrill running through me. The gala was a pressure cooker, a massive logistical challenge. But as I stood in that temporary kitchen, directing a team of volunteer chefs, smelling the familiar aromas, feeling the heat, I felt alive again. The food was a triumph. The compliments flowed. And more importantly, people talked. Other event organizers, wealthy patrons who missed my cooking, started calling. "Mark, could you possibly do a private dinner for 20? We're launching a new product. Need high-end catering." Each cautious, "Yes?" I gave was a small step, testing the waters, rebuilding my confidence one perfectly cooked meal at a time. The calls for private dinners and small catering gigs became more frequent. I was working out of a rented commercial kitchen space, piecing together equipment, calling in favors from old suppliers who were only too happy to work with me directly again. Then Leo Maxwell, my former sus chef from the Gilded Spoon, called. His voice was hushed, furtive. "Chef, can we meet?" "Not near the spoon. Somewhere quiet." We met at a small out-of-the-way diner. Leo looked stressed, older than his years. "It's a nightmare, chef," he said, barely touching his coffee. "Moreau's new menu, it's a disaster. The critics are savaging it. The new kitchen staff she brought in, they're all flash and no substance. Morale is zero. Half the old brigade has quit." He paused, then leaned in. "And the regulars, they're gone. Saturday nights, we used to be turning tables 3 times. Now, it's like a morgue. Projections are catastrophic." She's blaming the transition, blaming the old team, blaming everyone but herself. He then dropped the bomb. "And chef, they know you're doing private events. Legal had a meeting. They're talking about sending you a cease and desist, trying to enforce that non-compete. They're scared." Hearing that, knowing my cautious approach was the right one, and that my absence was being so keenly felt, wasn't vindictive pleasure, it was a profound validation. My decision to go independent, to trust my gut and my relationships, was the right one. Leo's intel was the proof. About 2 months into my new, somewhat nomadic chefing life, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. It was Harold Blackwood, the majority owner of the restaurant group that owned the Gilded Spoon. He was an old-school businessman, rarely involved in day-to-day operations, but his name carried weight. He wanted to meet. Privately, he specified. We met at his club, all dark wood and hushed tones. "Mark," he began, after the briefest of pleasantries, "we made a mistake, a significant one." He looked genuinely pained. "The Gilded Spoon is struggling. Revenue is down nearly 40%. Isabel Moreau's vision, while perhaps suited for a different market, has not resonated with our clientele. He paused. We want you to come back. Name your terms. Head chef, culinary director, whatever title you want. Full autonomy, and a significant increase on your previous package. It was a stunning offer. Vindication. A chance to reclaim my kitchen, my legacy. For a moment, I was tempted. The thought of walking back in, of seeing Moreau's face. But then I thought of the freedom I was experiencing, the direct connection with people who genuinely appreciated my food, the nascent business I was building on my own terms. Mr. Blackwood, I said slowly, I appreciate the offer, I truly do. But I've started something new. Something that's mine. He tried to persuade me, sweeten the deal, but my mind was made. I wasn't going back to fix their mess. I was busy building my own success. The idea had been percolating, a slow simmer in the back of my mind. Another restaurant felt like too much, too soon, too familiar. I wanted something different. The success of the private dinners and the gala had shown me there was an appetite for what I did, but outside the traditional restaurant model. I called Arthur Sterling. Arthur, I said, I have an idea. Not a restaurant. Think more, a collective. Holloway's Table, a high-end, bespoke culinary experience. We offer exclusive pop-up dinners in unique locations, curated tasting menus for private clients, maybe even masterclasses. Small, agile, focused entirely on quality and personal connection, no compromises. I then called Sarah Chen to vet the legalities. You're not reopening the Gilded Spoon, Mark, she confirmed. You're creating a new service, a new brand. As long as you're not actively poaching their specific, contracted corporate clients, which you aren't, these are private individuals seeking you out, you're on much safer ground. Armed with that, I pitched it to a few key patrons who had become informal advisors. Arthur was immediately on board, offering not just encouragement but seed capital. 2 other former regulars, successful entrepreneurs themselves, also invested. We weren't just building a business, we were creating a statement about what true hospitality meant. Holloway's Table launched with a series of exclusive, word-of-mouth dinners. We took over art galleries after hours, historic homes, even a beautifully restored barn in the countryside. Each event was unique, the menu crafted specifically for the occasion and the guests. Leo Maxwell, having finally had enough at the Gilded Spoon, joined me as my right hand. We hired a small, passionate team, a young sommelier, a meticulous pastry chef who'd also left the Spoon. Word spread like wildfire through the city's foodie circles. Local bloggers raved. A feature in the city magazine, titled The Chef's Counter, Revolution, brought a new wave of inquiries. We were booked months in advance. It was exhilarating, exhausting, and incredibly fulfilling. We were doing what we loved, on our own terms, and people were responding with an enthusiasm that humbled me. We were proving that quality, passion, and genuine connection were not relics, but timeless ingredients for success. Meanwhile, the whispers about the Gilded Spoon grew louder. Their attempt at Michelin Modern had become a local punchline. Tables sat empty. Reviews were brutal. One particularly scathing piece by a national food critic who had once lauded my work there lamented the soulless, over-engineered plates and the glacial service. Then, the inevitable headline in the business section. The Gilded Spoon struggles. Moreau out as GM. There was no triumph in reading it, just a quiet affirmation. They had chased trends, prioritized spreadsheets over pallets, and paid the price. My phone rang a few days later. It was Harold Blackwood again. His tone was somber. Mark, we're closing the Gilded Spoon, at least in its current form. We're looking to sell the lease. The status quo had well and truly reversed. The institution had crumbled while the individual they'd cast out was thriving. Holloway's Table continued to grow. We secured a permanent, beautifully designed commissary kitchen and a small office space, not in the glitzy downtown restaurant district, but in a revitalized industrial area buzzing with artisans and creatives. We expanded our offerings: gourmet meal deliveries, intimate cooking classes that sold out in minutes, and consulting for smaller restaurants wanting to elevate their cuisine without losing their soul. We were building a reputation not just for exquisite food, but for a different way of doing business in the hospitality world, one built on respect for ingredients, for craft, and for the people you serve. I wasn't just a chef anymore. I was an entrepreneur, a mentor, and, to my surprise, something of an inspiration to other chefs who felt stifled by the corporate culinary machine. We were a small, agile ship navigating waters where a giant had sunk, and one crisp autumn afternoon, I found myself walking by the shuttered Gilded Spoon. "A. For lease" sign hung in the window. There was no bitterness, no gloating, just a sense of peace. Isabel Moreau had tried to tell me my time was over, that my methods were outdated. But she and the system she represented had fundamentally misunderstood. Food, real food, is about connection. It's about memory, tradition, and innovation rooted in respect, not algorithms. Getting fired from the Gilded Spoon had felt like an ending. But it was a beginning. It forced me to strip everything back to its essence, to rediscover my own value not in the trappings of a famous restaurant, but in the core of my craft and the relationships I'd built. Sometimes, The old ways, the true ways, are the most revolutionary, especially when people have forgotten why they mattered. And sometimes being told you're a relic is the spark you need to build something truly timeless.